It's spooky season, bitches. What's up, party people? Welcome back to my channel. Today, I'm introducing y'all to a new series on my channel called A Scaredy-Cat Takes on Horror. So, I just don't read horror. And I don't think that's because I've been actively avoiding it. It's just something I've never gravitated towards too. And also, I'm a scaredy cat, as the title would imply. I like the idea of horror as a genre, but also I'm a wimp. So you see that there's a dilemma in my heart always, especially around this time. I'll go to a haunted house and I'm terrified the entire time, but it's also really fun, but also I'm so scared. And also, most of my friends are also scaredy cats, so they never want to do these things with me, and obviously I can't do this on my own. But I'm changing things. 2020 might be trash, but I'm changing things this month. I am going to be reading 4 horror books this week. This is going to be a 4-part series where I'll do horror books, I will do horror manga, I will be watching horror movies, and I will also be watching a horror TV show. Am I saying horror or whore? The world may never know. What those will be a surprise to you. I will be posting this every Saturday with the final video on Halloween. And so, yeah, I'm excited about that. So this week we are going to be doing horror books, and honestly, I can't even think of the last time I even read a horror book. I'm thinking of Frankenstein, like my senior year of high school, which was like 8 years ago. So, and then I do recall reading the Telltale Heart by Edgar Allan Poe in middle school. So I'm just not familiar with horror books at all, or the genre. So I decided to pick 4 books. All of them are pretty short. I think the longest is 250 pages, just because I'm trying to read them in a week, and also I'm in school and all of this other stuff, so I wanted to make it easier on myself. So the first book that I'm going to be reading this week is The Mist by Stephen King. Obviously, Stephen King is the king of horror. I have never read a single Stephen King book, which is hilarious because my dad is a new stan of Stephen King, so he's been trying to get me to read Stephen King. I'm not super interested, but I am now. The Mist follows David and his son Billy, and there was a super destructive thunderstorm that happened, and then the next morning there is a mist, as the title would suggest, on the lake that they live by. And so things are gonna happen, I'm assuming. Basically, they're swept into a living nightmare as unnatural and violent forces concealed by the mist begin to emerge and wreak havoc in their wake. They're trapped at a local supermarket with a ragtag group of survivors. And wow, that sounds kind of dramatic, but I'm excited to read this. Sounds spooky. I'm really curious to see how horror translates in books, because I think for me, a lot of what scares me is the visuals, tension, all of that stuff. So it's going to be interesting how, like, the words, like, pull me in and scare me. Like, will I be able to really picture it? Will I scare myself? Who knows? So, but anyway, that is the first book that I'm going to be reading. The next book I have here is The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman, and I first heard of this from Murphy Napier here on BookTube. She talked about this. Ooh, this is kind of glaring, but She talked about this on her channel and just raved about it, and it sounds like it's very much like a psychological horror short story. And so I was really intrigued by that. So the yellow wallpaper follows a woman who is basically driven to the brink of insanity. She recently had a child, and it seems like her doctor prescribed her to be in isolation. I think because she's maybe experiencing postpartum depression. I'm not really sure. The description isn't super detailed on that front. But she is isolated in her crumbling colonial mansion. There are bars on her window. She just stares at this yellow wallpaper. And yeah, this has been regarded as like a feminist piece. I've heard good things about it, and so I'm excited to read it. The next book that I'm going to be reading this week is The Ballad of Black Tom by Victor Lavelle. Basically, this is a short novella that is revisiting H.P. Lovecraft's story, The Horror on Red Hook, from the viewpoint of a black man. And I was particularly interested in this book because I've just been hearing a lot more about H.P. Lovecraft this year, especially with Lovecraft Country coming out on HBO and all of that stuff. But apparently H.P. Lovecraft was like a raging racist and like violently racist and problematic. So I have never read any of his works before, but I know he's had a very big impact on the horror and science fiction genre. Basically, The Ballad of Black Tom follows Tommy Tester in 1924 Harlem. He's a small town hustler, and he comes across a reclusive millionaire named Robert Sweedam, not quite sure how that's pronounced. And this millionaire wants him to participate in a nefarious scheme involving the Great Old Ones. I don't know who the Great Old Ones are. I'm assuming I'm going to find out when reading this. But I'm super excited for this, and I can't wait to read it. All right, and the final book that I'm going to be reading this week is I Am Legend by Richard Matheson. I Am Legend is a movie that I've seen already. I really liked it, and it freaked me out a lot as a kid. So it's going to be really interesting to read this book. It follows Robert Melville, who's the last man on Earth. All of the people turned into zombies. If I'm recalling correctly from the movie, it's because there was some sort of serum or medicine or something that got messed up and turned everyone into these zombies. And so he's hunting them. He's trying to survive. He has a dog from the movie. I don't know if this dog exists in this book, but that was a heartbreaking scene, if you know what I'm talking about, where, yeah, with his dog. Super excited to read this one. I really enjoyed the movie when I was younger, and I think I own the DVD randomly, so maybe I'll watch that after I read it and maybe compare the two. Who knows? That is all of the books that I'm going to be reading this week as I take on the horror genre. I'm excited. I'm a little bit nervous because most of my free times are in the evening and at night. And is that a good moment for me to be reading all of this? Probably not, but YOLO swag, you know what I'm saying? So stay tuned. Hey y'all, I realized that I never started filming or talking about the horror books that I'm reading yesterday, because technically I started reading yesterday. I got some clips of like stuff that I did yesterday. Like I went to this flea market with a friend, and then we went to this like antique store that was next to it. So I'll like overlay some footage of that over this as I'm talking. But today's Monday, and I am putting on makeup so that I can film the intro for this video. I started The Mist by Stephen King last night, and it's okay so far. I don't know that I like Stephen King's writing. This is my first Stephen King book. I've never read anything from him. The only Stephen King related movie that I've seen was It, chapters 1 and 2. Anyway, so I am reading The Mist. The writing, I don't know, I guess I've heard this from other people, like he has like super descriptive writing, like to the point of it being kind of unnecessary. At least that is my thought so far, especially because The Mist is only like 170 pages, so it's not that long. But I can tell like he is like setting up the atmosphere, so it's not terrible, but I don't know, hasn't been scary yet. I can tell that it might be. I don't know. I just really don't know what to expect from horror books, just because I feel like for me, I get scared because of visuals and stuff like that. So I'm just curious to see how these books that I'm going to be reading this week are going to make me scared, you know, because I do scare easily, but I feel like if I'm just like reading words, it's less, I feel like maybe slightly disconnected from that. So we'll see. As far as today, I am hoping to finish The Mist at least by tonight. I have 2 classes this evening, copyright law and international environmental law. I feel like this foundation, I don't know if you guys can even tell, but I feel like my foundation is like getting slightly too dark for me now. And I'm just like, who is she? Who is this? I need to get like a lighter foundation color, I think. But yeah, I have class tonight, so I need to do some readings for that today after I film the intro for this video. And then I need to finish captioning another video that I'm hoping to have up later today or tomorrow. And yeah, I guess I'll check in with y'all a little bit later. Hello y'all, I finished recording my intro for this video and now I am getting ready to do copyright law reading. A lovely 40 pages. Probably should have done this earlier. Oh well. Looking a bit oily right now, but I am reading The Mist right now. I have like 30 minutes before my class, so I thought I would just lay in bed and read. I just wanted to pop on here real quick because there was a really funny line that just made me laugh. It said, "Old trees have always reminded me of the Ents in Tolkien's wonderful Rings saga." Like, Rings saga? Okay. I just thought that was a really funny description of the Lord of the Rings series, but anyway, I'm gonna continue reading. I don't know if I like Mr. King's writing, but just look at this sentence. I'm sure it's sticking out to you right now, right here. Why did he describe this like that? For what was the reason? It was unnecessary. Even when we're going to talk about public performance or public display, we're still going to need... Hello, y'all. It is Tuesday, the next day. In the afternoon, I'm eating lunch. Some lasagna that I made a few days ago. And yeah, I stayed up until like 1:30 last night reading and finishing The Mist by Stephen King. And then I kept snoozing my alarm this morning, so I woke up later than I wanted, so I was kind of scrambling to finish some of my readings before my environmental justice class this morning. But now I'm eating lunch, and I thought it would be a good time to tell y'all what I thought about The Mist. It was okay. I think I would give this 3 stars. I don't know that I necessarily like Stephen King's writing style. I mean, I know this is only one book, but yeah. I will say he does a good job of creating like a creepy atmosphere. I was definitely feeling like a little anxious like while reading this book, definitely like a little bit on the edge of my seat. I wouldn't say that I was scared though. I think it was more just like the anxiousness and anticipation of like what was gonna happen. The descriptions, there were some kind of gory descriptions, but that didn't really bother me that much. Yeah, this was short. Also, I don't really follow a lot of Stephen King discourse. So I'm not sure if this is something that people talk about a lot, but I did not enjoy the way Stephen King wrote women or about women or talked about women in this book. I have all of these tabs, like there's not that much, but all of these tabs were descriptions or things that he said about women that bothered me. And I mean, in the grand scheme of this story, there weren't things that like super bothered me, but there were moments where it kind of took me out of the story and I found myself wondering what was the point of this. All of the women were kind of either damsels in distress or described as like crazy. There was one character that was kind of hardened and like helping out and stuff, but she was the only one and she didn't really have that much like screen time, but like every other woman. And there was like a lot of fixation on women's bodies that I found really unnecessary, especially given the context of what the story was about. I just thought it was really unnecessary and I didn't really like it that much. So there's that. And also, this is something I have heard about how Stephen King doesn't know how to write endings or doesn't finish his books well. And I can kind of see that in this. It kind of left with an open-ended ending, which, I mean, it didn't bother me that much, but I didn't need like a concrete resolution by any means, but I just didn't like the way it kind of ended off. It felt rushed and he kind of just was like, oh, well, here's the end. And it left me a little bit confused. But yeah, that is how I felt about The Mist. It was fine. Will I check out some of Stephen King's other works? Maybe. It's all I got for y'all. For right now, I think I am going to just knock out the yellow wallpaper today. Like, it's 15 pages. So I'm just gonna read that probably tonight, and then I'm thinking about starting The Ballad of Black Tom also tonight. So I will update y'all if I have anything interesting to say. But I'm gonna go eat my lasagna and then I'm gonna go do some homework. So I'll catch y'all later. Hello, it is 8 p.m. I finished class like an hour ago. I ate dinner and now I'm gonna start the yellow wallpaper. folks? It is now Wednesday, and I think the last clip I got was a time lapse of me reading The Yellow Wallpaper, and then I just didn't comment on that afterwards. So I'm here to talk about The Yellow Wallpaper because I finished it in like 20 minutes. I thought it was gonna be faster, but I didn't realize that this book was written like in 1892, so it was a bit slow for me to get through, but it was good. Give this 4 stars, like somewhere between a 3.5 and a 4 star. Also, the way I've heard this book described was not necessarily what I got from this book. I thought that the main character was forced into isolation by herself in a room, and that is not the case. She gets prescribed a rest cure, which she basically can't do anything rigorous. She can't write. She can't go out on her own. She basically just needs to rest all the time. And I think it's not explicitly said, but I think it's because she's suffering from postpartum depression. And so she's very anxious and nervous, and they're just really downplaying her mental health experience and telling her that she needs to pull herself out of it. It was like hella grimy, but she is stuck in this house and with her husband, her baby, and her sister-in-law. So she's not in complete isolation, but she basically can't really leave this house. And so they are in this house where there's this like yellow wallpaper in their bedroom or like sitting room. I wasn't quite sure. And she kind of becomes like obsessed with the yellow wallpaper and believes that there's like a woman trapped inside of it. So it was wild. Definitely commentary on women and women's mental health and on the rest cure. After I finished reading this, I like immediately started looking into the author. And that's when I discovered that this book was written in 1892, and I don't know what happened, but I thought it was written in 1980, so I was very lost while reading this book. But it was written in 1892, and it was basically Charlotte Perkins Gilman wrote this because she was suffering from depression and anxiety and just, mental health issues, and her doctor, and this was very common at the time, they would prescribe rest cures for this, and she was not happy with that, and it was honestly just making things worse for her, and she finally just stopped this rest cure and started going back to her normal life, and then was able to go to a woman doctor, a female doctor, who was adamantly against the rest cure and helped her come up with strategies to help manage her mental health. So she wrote this kind of as a response and then sent it to that male doctor that originally prescribed the rest cure, and I don't know what came of that, but I just thought that was really interesting. And apparently this book, or short story rather, was hailed as this big feminist work, and I can see that, especially for the time. I think that this isn't necessarily like super radical now, but I mean, there's certainly conversations to be had around the stigma still that we currently have around mental health. But as far as like the specific things that were talked about in here, not super out there or anything now, but definitely was a good read. Yeah, that's pretty much what I have to say about this. And then I also read The Ballad of Black Tom last night. I went through it so fast. I was not expecting to read it that fast. But wow, so good. I just want to read you this excerpt because I was like, woo, what a line. I bear a hell within me, Black Tom growled, and finding myself unsympathized with, wished to tear up the trees, spread havoc and destruction around me, and then to have sat down and enjoyed the ruin. You're a monster then, Malone said. I was made one. Dang. There was a lot of like good little like paragraphs and lines like that in here. And yeah, you know what? Like, I think speculative speculative fiction, like Afrofuturism, African futurism, black science fiction. I think that's like my favorite genre. I think that's what my favorite genre is, just because like it's so cutting and has a lot of commentary, but it's so otherworldly at the same time. Like this was weird to read. It was so weird. Some of the concepts were like really weird, but then it was also commentating on race. So yeah, I really like it. It was good. I'm hovering between 4.5 and 5 stars on this one, but wow, I am very interested in reading more from Victor Lavelle. I have The Changeling by him on my Kindle, so maybe I'll read that this month also, but this was so good. The Ballad of Black Tom, highly, highly recommend it. Read it. I think it's still only like $2.99 on the Amazon Kindle. If you don't want to support Amazon, which fair. I think it might also be $2.99 on the like iBooks app or something like that, but or just buy it, you know, just buy a physical copy if you'd like. But it's so good. Read it, okay? Just read it. Anyways, I am gonna go through my emails, and then I'm going to a Zoom panel for like racial justice and voting rights that's being put on by the public law interest group at my school. So I'm gonna do that at noon, and then after I'm gonna maybe do homework, you know. Good morning, party people. It is now Thursday. I started and finished I Am Legend yesterday. And I did not like it. I didn't like it at all. Let's chat about that. So, it was a slow start, and it was kind of boring to get into. Damn, this lighting is rough. It was kind of rough to get into. And then I didn't realize that this book was written in the 1950s. I had it in my head that it was written in the 80s or 90s for some reason. So imagine my surprise when I'm reading this book and Robert, the main character, is recalling a conversation that he had with someone, I think an old coworker or something like that, and refers to him as the Negro. And I was like, whoop, wait a second. What time period are we in right now? Because I am shook. So yeah, I paused and like looked it up, and I was like, oh, this book came out in 1954. All right. Yeah, cool. We're just gonna refer to this person, the only unnamed person that he references, as the Negro. Cool. Yeah, so that threw me for a loop. And then, wow, this book left me feeling very unsettled, and not in the way I'm assuming the author intended. Yeah, the way he talks about women are so grody. It's so grody. So obviously Robert is the last man alive, presumably, and so he hasn't had sex in a while. And so one thing that happens at night when like the vampire infected people show up is that the vampire women will try to entice him to come outside of his house. So they'll like pose suggestively or even like take off their clothes, and this gets him going. Woo! And it was so weird, and he just gets so like violently angry at the women. And you see this throughout the book. He'll go, when he's like testing on vampires, he will kind of go out of his way to get only like female test subjects. And he has such like violent thoughts about them. There was even a point in the book where he straight up was like unsure of himself on whether or not he was going to like rape one of the women, so it was pretty weird. Yeah, there's just a lot of conversations like that surrounding his desire for women, and it's very, like, disgusting to read. So there's that. I don't particularly like Robert as a character at all. Definitely supposed to be like the gruff, masculine, super macho type of character, and that never usually appeals to me. And especially since we're spending so much time in his head, like, he's just by himself because he's like the last person alive or not infected. And so it was not fun because he's kind of boring and bland, but then on top of that he's like going on weird, like, violent tangents against women. But and then, like, just even the way that this book describes his grief feels like very, like, toxic masculinity. Like, he's never just, like, working through his emotions or just, like, feeling. Anytime any sort of emotional thing, like, bubbles up in him, he either excessively drinks whiskey or just, like, gets very violent and starts smashing things or just, like, pacing, or I don't know. I mean, obviously, like, I don't know what it's like to be the last person on earth, you know, and, like, you watched your family die. But yeah, I don't know. It just felt weird that the author chose, and again, I guess that makes sense because it's written in the 50s, but all of his expressions of grief are just very, like, violent or, you know, like, very masculine sounding. So it was just, like, kind of weird. And you know, the author really had, like, a very interesting story to work with. I feel like the author could have broached a lot of these topics, grief, mental health, loneliness, and doing it within a very nuanced way, which I felt like that was missing. I don't know what I'm thinking. Maybe I'm just looking too too deep into this book, but it's just, yeah, it wasn't for me. I think the underlying story is really interesting, and the ending was kind of interesting. I think in certain aspects, I wanted this to be a little bit longer because, again, a lot of interesting things could have been explored. I don't really think the lore or the science behind this virus or how the vampires particularly work was explained very well. I definitely felt a little half-assed at certain points. And the ending it was unexpected, but it was fine, but I wanted more from that. That kind of seemed interesting, or maybe like a follow-up, but I'm also glad it wasn't longer than it was, because truly it was such a drag to read. It was really, I just didn't particularly like the writing style either, so I gave this book 2 stars, and I'm gonna be controversial and say that the Will Smith movie was better than this book. So I did not like this book at all, and those are my thoughts on that. So and I will probably wrap up this video tomorrow. So hello, it is Friday. I am editing this video, and I was going through the footage that I filmed for this outro, and it turns out it was out of focus the entire time. So I'm just doing an old-fashioned iPhone ending, I suppose you could say. To wrap it up, for this week I read The Mist by Stephen King, gave it 3 stars. I read The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman, gave it 4 stars. I read The Ballad of Black Tom by Victor LaValle, gave that 5 stars. And lastly, I read I Am Legend by Richard Matheson. I gave it 2 stars. The question of the day, was I scared? No. Don't know if that was my selections or I'm just tougher than I appear. But yeah, I wasn't really scared. So if y'all have any suggestions on books that are scary for me to read, go ahead and drop those below. But yeah, I'm gonna leave it at that. Stay tuned for the next video next week where I take on horror films. Definitely gonna be spicy because I'm a visual person and I am easily started with jump scares. So If you want to know what movies I'm going to watch for that, you know, stay tuned. And I'll catch y'all in the next video. Go ahead, you know, like, subscribe, comment, all of that jazz, you know. And I'll catch y'all in the next video.